Quando Rondo has come out and revealed that the rolling 60s Crips are trying to kill him after he made the decision to walk away from the gang entirely. What he revealed changed the way a lot of people looked at gang loyalty altogether. And the deeper you go into what actually happened behind the scenes, the harder it is to look away. But the real question is, what pushed him to that point in the first place? Because once you hear the full story, the decision to walk away will be the least surprising part of all of it. If you think this story starts and ends with somebody simply leaving the gang, you are not even close to understanding what actually happened here. Yo, what's good, fam? Today we are breaking down the full story of how Quando Rondo went from one of the most recognizable young voices in street rap to a man publicly accusing his own gang of setting him up to die. We are talking about the fatal ambush that changed everything. The street allegations of betrayal from within, the federal murder for hire conspiracy that put the entire industry on notice, the spiritual transformation that pulled him away from the streets entirely, and where he stands right now as he prepares for full freedom. This situation is far more complicated than it looks on the surface, and the full timeline explains exactly why his life changed forever. To understand where Quando Rondo stands today, you have to go back to where he started. Tykean Bowman was born and raised in Savannah, Georgia, and from the very beginning, his path was shaped by the environment around him. He was not some kid who stumbled into street culture by accident. He was embedded in it. He spent time in juvenile detention as a teenager, did months in county jail, and it was after that stint behind bars in 2017 that he decided to dedicate himself fully to music. What followed was a rapid ascent that surprised a lot of people who had never heard of Savannah on a rap map. His 2018 single I Remember, featuring Lil Baby, went platinum. His debut studio album Q-Pack dropped in 2020 and entered the Billboard 200. Songs like ABG and Imperfect Flower established him as one of the most melodic young voices in street rap. He was signed to NBA Youngboy's label, connected to one of the most loyal and passionate fan bases in the game, and he was growing fast. For a kid from Savannah who had never really been supposed to make it out, this was the dream becoming real. But here's where it gets real. Quando Rondo's come up did not arrive clean. Long before the streaming numbers and the sold-out shows, he was already known in Savannah and Atlanta circles for his affiliation with the streets. Alongside the music, alongside the streams and the platinum plaques, came an identity that was rooted in street affiliation. During his teenage years, Quando had joined the Savannah and Atlanta subset of the rolling 60s neighborhood Crips, and this was not something he kept hidden or tried to separate from his public persona. Federal prosecutors would later allege that he held a leadership role within that set. His affiliation became part of his image, part of how he moved, part of how he presented himself in interviews, music videos, and on social media. In a genre where authenticity to the streets is often treated as currency, Quando Rondo spent his entire come-up cashing in. The problem with building your identity on street loyalty is that the streets do not offer the same loyalty back. And the events that followed proved that in the most brutal way possible. November 6, 2020, that day became one of the most talked about moments in hip-hop history, and it permanently attached Quando Rondo's name to a tragedy that he would spend years trying to navigate the aftermath of. Outside the Monaco Hookah Lounge in Atlanta, a physical altercation broke out between King Von's crew and Quando Rondo's crew. What started as a confrontation between two rap camps turned deadly within minutes. King Von was shot and killed during that altercation, and Quando Rondo's associate known as Lil Tim was arrested and charged with felony murder in connection with his death. Quando was present. Lil Tim's charges were ultimately dismissed in August 2023 before ever reaching an indictment, with prosecutors determining the shooting amounted to self-defense. But none of that legal resolution did anything to cool the temperature in the streets. The entire incident had been captured on surveillance footage that spread across the internet almost immediately, and the reaction from the hip-hop community was explosive. King Von was one of the most beloved artists in Chicago rap, a core member of Lil Durk's OTF family, and his death sent shockwaves through an entire culture. The grief was immediate, and it was fierce. And a significant portion of that grief came wrapped in rage directed straight at Quando Rondo. He tried to address it in his music, most notably on the track End of Story, but there was no song in the world that was going to diffuse what that moment had created. The streets were not interested in explanations. They were building toward retaliation. Now let me break down for y'all exactly what happened next. because this is where the story gets darker than most people have fully processed. August 19th, 2022. It was around 5:30 in the afternoon in the Beverly Grove neighborhood of Los Angeles, near the intersection of San Vicente and Santa Monica Boulevard. Quando Rondo, his sister, and members of his entourage, including his close cousin Xavier Robinson, known to the world as Lou Pab, were stopped at a mobile gas station near the Beverly Center. They were sitting inside a black Cadillac Escalade. Witnesses describe it as an execution-style ambush. 3 masked gunmen wearing dark clothing jumped out of a white sedan that had pulled up alongside the Escalade and opened fire directly into the vehicle. Quando and his sister were not physically hit. Lou Pab was struck by multiple gunshots. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital. He was 24 years old. He did not survive. Videos from that day circulated online almost immediately, and they were gut-wrenching to watch. You could see Quando Rondo frantic and screaming in sheer devastation as law enforcement arrived and pulled Lou Pab's body from the vehicle. This was not a rap beef unfolding at a safe distance on social media. This was Quando watching someone he had grown up with, his cousin, his close friend, get pulled out of a truck dead while he was standing right there. Law enforcement confirmed that Quando was the intended target of the attack. Someone had sent those gunmen specifically for him, and the bullet that was meant to kill Quando Rondo took Lou Pab instead. That is a weight that no amount of time, money, or music can fully lift off a person. But here's where it gets real spicy, fam, because the allegations that followed the shooting shook the entire situation to its foundation. After the attack, Quando Rondo did not stay quiet. He went online and said publicly that he was done. He announced that he was laying his flag down, that he was walking away from the rolling 60s, and he made it clear that he believed there was no loyalty left in the set. His Instagram post from that period could not have been more direct. He wrote that his main man was gone, that he was free from a lot of people, and that anyone not truly with him had no reason to be in his life. He stated plainly that he was not going to get jumped out, that the gang had never shown him real loyalty, and that he was choosing himself, his family, and his future over everything he had previously been tied to. Now, alongside his public statements came something that shook the entire situation to its foundation. Quando Rondo did not just walk away quietly, he went online and publicly accused his own gang members of setting him up. He made it clear that he believed people inside his own Rolling 60s subset had backstabbed him by leaking his exact location in California to rival OTF members, essentially handing the enemy a roadmap to find him that day. That accusation is what made the whole situation so explosive. In the streets and across hip-hop commentary, those claims spread rapidly, and the conversation around betrayal from within became impossible to ignore. It is important to note that no Rolling 60s member has been charged or convicted in any court for leaking his location. That specific allegation remains in the streets. But what the federal indictment does confirm is that OTF associates flew from Chicago to Los Angeles the day before the shooting after learning Quando was staying at a hotel in the city. From there, according to prosecutors, they physically tailed him across Los Angeles for an entire day, following him from a marijuana dispensary to a West Hollywood clothing store and eventually to the gas station across from the Beverly Center, where they made their move. Whether or not anyone from the Rolling 60s played a role in tipping them off, Quando himself believed it, said it publicly, and that belief was the final thing that ended his relationship with the set he had repped his entire life. The real kicker, though, is what the federal investigation revealed about who orchestrated the entire plot. Federal prosecutors alleged that Lil Durk, whose real name is Dirk Derrick Banks, organized the murder-for-hire conspiracy targeting Quando Rondo as direct retaliation for King Von's death. According to prosecutors, Dirk allegedly placed a monetary bounty on Quando's head, and that OTF finances were used to fund every step of the operation, from the flights to the rental cars to the weapons. Prosecutors further alleged that an OTF-affiliated individual promised lucrative music industry opportunities to anyone who would successfully murder Quando Rondo. On October 24th, 2024, 5 individuals were arrested by federal authorities in connection with Lou Pab's death. The charges included conspiracy to commit murder for hire, committing murder for hire involving the death, and use of a machine gun in a violent crime leading to death. Lil Durk was arrested the following day in Florida attempting to flee the country and charged with conspiracy to commit murder for hire. He was detained without bail, and his trial is currently scheduled for August 20th, 2026. Quando Rondo is identified in the federal indictment as the target, not a defendant. These are allegations that have not yet reached a final verdict, but they represent some of the most significant revelations to ever come out of a hip-hop related federal case. For those who haven't been keeping up, let me explain why Lil Pop's death specifically was the moment that broke something inside of Quando Rondo permanently. Lil Pop was not just an associate, he was family in the truest sense. He was Quando's cousin. He was also someone who had built a life outside the music and the streets, running a truck business called A&S Express Carriers and a French bulldog breeding operation called Supreme Exotic Frenchies. He was a young man trying to create something real for himself beyond the chaos that surrounded their circle. He was 24 years old with his whole life ahead of him, and he died at a gas station in Los Angeles because someone wanted Quando dead. In the aftermath, Quando posted a photo of the two of them together and wrote simply, "My cuz." He posted another story with 2PAC's Life Goes On playing in the background. He wrote in another story that Lil Pap had hurt his heart. Short posts, simple words. But behind them was the weight of a man processing something that no amount of money, fame, or gang affiliation could protect him from or prepare him for. There are no words that fully cover what it means to watch someone you love get pulled out of a vehicle in front of you. That grief does not leave. And for Quando, it clearly triggered a reckoning with everything the streets had ever given him and everything they had taken from him. The math was no longer adding up. He had been in the game long enough to see what it took and what it cost, and the cost had just hit him in the most personal way possible. Now, this is where we got to address the chapter of this story that a lot of people did not see coming. In the months and years following the ambush and Lil Pop's death, Quando Rondo began a very public and very sincere-looking spiritual transformation. He began embracing Islam. He spoke about getting on his deen, and he did so without apology and without hesitation. His entire public presentation began to shift. The gang imagery, the flag waving, the aggressive street posturing that had defined so much of his come-up started giving way to something quieter and more centered. In November 2024, he spoke directly to Hot New Hip Hop about what Islam had done for him. He said, "It just gave me good peace and energy. Taking my shot and being a part of Islam, it just gave me better energy. It gave me some of the best energy I ever had." He also said, around September 2024, that it was time to leave the beef behind, that he and Lil Durk had families and communities counting on them, and that he was ready to move past all of it. That was a remarkable statement from a man who had spent years at the center of one of hip-hop's most dangerous ongoing conflicts. For those who might not be familiar with what getting on your deen actually means, let me break it down. In Islam, the deen refers to one's entire way of life under the guidance of the religion, its principles, practices, disciplines, and moral commitments. It is not simply about going to a mosque or reciting prayers. It is a total realignment of how you move through the world. When someone says they are getting on their deen, they are committing themselves to living according to those principles more seriously and consistently. It involves prayer, discipline, conduct, and the way you carry yourself publicly and privately. There is an emphasis on accountability, on community, and on surrendering the ego to something larger than individual ambition. For someone who had spent years operating inside a world defined by pride, retaliation, and survival instincts, that kind of shift is not a small adjustment. It is a complete reorientation. Fans who have followed Quando for years noticed visible changes. The energy of his posts was different. The way he talked about his future was different. Whether you are a believer or not, what was impossible to deny was that something had genuinely shifted in how Quando Rondo saw himself and where he was trying to go. But here's where it gets real complicated again. Because even while he was publicly embracing a new path, the consequences of the old one were still waiting at his door. In December 2023, the FBI arrested Quando Rondo on federal drug charges. The original indictment, filed in the Southern District of Georgia, named him alongside 8 co-defendants on charges that included conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine, fentanyl, cocaine, and marijuana, with alleged conduct going back to at least January 2021 in Chatham County, Georgia. Prosecutors alleged he held a leadership role in the Rollin' 60s and that this role was connected to the distribution conspiracy. On June 25, 2024, he reached a plea agreement with prosecutors. On August 13, 2024, He entered a formal guilty plea to conspiracy to possess and distribute marijuana, a lesser charge than what he originally faced. On December 12, 2024, Tyquin Bowman was sentenced to 33 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release, in order to pay a $40,000 fine. He turned himself in on January 10, 2025, and began serving his sentence at FCI Edgefield in South Carolina. Even as he was trying to walk away from everything that had defined his street identity, the system was making sure he understood that walking away does not erase what came before. That said, the most recent chapter of this story carries with it something that looks unmistakably like forward movement. In May 2026, after spending approximately 15 months behind bars, Quando Rondo received a 5-month reduction in his sentence. On May 27, 2026, he was officially transferred out of FCI Edgefield and placed into community confinement under RAM Atlanta, a residential reentry management facility that oversees halfway house placements across Georgia and South Carolina. The Federal Bureau of Prisons confirmed his transfer and stated that his projected full release date is November 11, 2026. The halfway house is not freedom in the traditional sense. Residents are required to comply with strict rules involving curfews, drug testing, employment, and travel restrictions. But within that structure is the recognition from the federal system itself that Tyquin Bowman spent 15 months incarcerated without disciplinary infractions, conducted himself appropriately, and earned the right to begin transitioning back into society. November 11th, 2026 is now on the calendar as the date that everything he has been working toward could finally come together. The real question is, what all of this adds up to when you zoom out and look at the complete picture. A kid from Savannah who climbed out of juvenile detention and county jail to become a platinum-selling artist. A rapper whose Rolling 60s affiliation became so central to his identity that federal prosecutors used it as a centerpiece of their case against him. A man who was present when one of hip-hop's most beloved figures was killed and who spent years living under the threat of retaliation for it. A cousin shot dead right beside him at a gas station in broad daylight. A decision to publicly renounce his gang while the streets buzzed with rumors that his own set had played a role in his near death. A federal murder-for-hire conspiracy built around the specific goal of ending his life. A spiritual transformation toward Islam that gave him, by his own words, the best energy he had ever felt. A guilty plea, a 33-month sentence, 15 months served, and now a halfway house in Atlanta with full freedom on the horizon in November 2026. That is not a rap career arc. That is a survival story. And the fact that so much of it played out publicly, on Instagram stories, in court documents, in federal indictments, and in real-time street commentary made it impossible for the culture to look away. Every chapter arrived with receipts attached, and that transparency, whether intentional or forced by circumstance, made Quando Rondo's journey one of the most closely followed personal sagas in modern hip-hop. Now, this ain't just about Quando. It is about the fact that every single update in this saga continues to generate enormous attention, and that is not an accident. The combination of gang politics, celebrity federal court proceedings, the death of Lil Pab, the street rumors surrounding Betrayal from Within, the Lil Durk murder-for-hire case, the spiritual journey, the prison sentence, and the climb back toward freedom created one of the most dramatic personal transformations modern hip-hop has ever documented in real time. Every YouTube video, every TikTok, every hip-hop media update about Quando Rondo draws massive engagement because the audience understands that this is bigger than music. This is a human being navigating survival inside one of the most unforgiving ecosystems in the country, and doing so publicly while millions of people watch. Public opinion on Quando Rondo remains split, and that division is not going away anytime soon. There are people who believe wholeheartedly that what they are watching is a man who genuinely looked at his life, recognized what the streets had cost him, and chose a completely different direction. They point to Lil Pab's death as the undeniable turning point. They point to his embrace of Islam as evidence of a sincere internal shift. They point to his willingness to publicly disavow his affiliation at a time when doing so carried real risk, knowing full well what that kind of statement can mean in the environment he came from. They point to 15 months served without incident. They point to the albums he released while dealing with all of this, Recovery in 2023, and Here for a Reason in 2024, as evidence that even in the middle of chaos, he was still trying to create and communicate something meaningful. And then there are people who remain skeptical, who look at his history and the federal charges and the decade-long street narrative and see someone whose past actions still define the present no matter what he says now. Both perspectives exist online simultaneously, and neither side is completely wrong, which is exactly why the debate never really ends. The culture is watching closely, and it will continue watching. At the end of the day, Quando Rondo's story became something far larger than a rap career. It became a document of what violence, loss, alleged betrayal, institutional pressure, and spiritual searching can do to a person when they all arrive at the same time in rapid succession. The death of Lil Pab appears to have permanently altered the direction of his life in a way that no conversation, no interview, and no diss track ever could have. You cannot watch someone you love get pulled out of a vehicle and go back to treating the streets like a game. That moment does something to a person that does not undo itself. What started as a story about a kid who made it out of Savannah long enough to go platinum ended up being about something much heavier. It became about what it actually cost to survive inside a world built on loyalty that was never real. It became about what happens to a person when the violence they were surrounded by finally arrives at their doorstep and takes someone irreplaceable. It became about whether a person, once they have seen enough, can actually choose to become something different from what the streets made them. Regardless of where public opinion lands, what Quando Rondo has been communicating with his choices over the last few years is clear. He wants out. He wants peace. He found something in his faith that the streets could not give him. And now, with a halfway house in Atlanta standing between him and the life he says he wants to build, the entire industry is watching to see whether November 2026 marks the beginning of a genuinely new chapter or just another complicated turn in a story that has never been simple and probably never will be. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe Quando Rondo has truly turned a new page, or do you think the past is going to catch up to him? Let us know where you stand, and make sure you tap in with the content on screen for more stories just like this. 1.